Democrats have yet to pass Joe Biden's sweeping legislative agenda that consists of two bills. There's the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and then there is the social spending bill that is to be passed through what's called budget reconciliation. It only takes 50 Democrats, that's all they have in the Senate, right? So that second bill has been held up because conservative Democrats, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, have had objections. Here's Manchin yesterday slamming the negotiating tactics of his progressive Democratic colleagues.
In my view, this is not how the United States Congress should operate, or in my view, has operated in the past. For the sake of the country, I urge the House to vote and pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Holding this bill hostage is not going to work in getting my support for reconciliation bill. While I've worked hard to find a path to compromise, it's obvious compromise is not good enough for a lot of my colleagues in Congress. It's all or nothing.
Now, the White House says it remains confident that President Biden's plan will get Manchin's support. Joining us now, President Biden's Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg. Secretary, thank you for being with us this morning. Another critical day. It seems like we've had maybe too many critical days when it comes to this legislation. But are you 100% sure that President Biden can get Joe Manchin on board with the Build Back Better bill?
You know, a few days ago, I said that we're the closest we've ever been. I think this morning we are closer still. Obviously, we want to see this literally signed, sealed, and delivered. But what's clear is that there is enormous momentum behind this legislation. And that's not just on Capitol Hill. That's not just coming from the president. But the more Americans hear about what these two pieces of legislation mean for them, the more you see that eagerness and that impatience to get it done. As people are hearing about the opportunity to have free pre-K for all 3- and 4-year-olds in the country and thinking about what that means for them. Understanding that 9 out of 10 families personally have hundreds or thousands of dollars on the line if they have children when it comes to the extension of this child tax credit. People beginning to imagine what they would do with that discount, that tax credit of up to $12,500 to buy an electric vehicle and never have to worry about gas prices again. These are the kinds of things that are going to make a concrete difference in American lives. And I think that's why you're continuing to see this excitement and this energy. Obviously, a piece of legislation or two pieces of legislation this big and this complex, going to take a lot to get it through all of the different hoops that Congress can have. But again, feel very confident. And the president, put forward this particular framework with its particular dimensions, believing that this is the framework that will pass both houses of Congress and get to his desk.
Okay, so you're very confident the president can get Joe Manchin on board. Is that the read?
Absolutely. Very confident that this can get through the House and the Senate. And I'll tell you, the moment that it does, obviously my department and others are ready. We just had another discussion yesterday with my colleagues about all of the things that we have to do to be prepared to deploy these taxpayer dollars effectively. I mean, it's one thing to say that we're going to have this funding identified, but when you think about the work that's actually going to be involved in getting over $100 billion out to improve roads and bridges in this country, making those investments in ports that we're seeing just how important ports are right now, enhancing our safety, doing the things we've got to do on the ports and airports. And I know every department in this administration is poised and ready to get the job done as soon as that bill gets to the president's desk so he can sign it and we can get to work.
I want to ask you, the transportation secretary, about what we call jerks on planes, because it's something that we seem to be seeing so much of. There was actually a criminal complaint filed in U.S. District Court in Colorado over an alleged assault on a flight attendant last week that resulted in her concussion. You've brought up the possibility of a no-fly list for these people who are perpetrating these attacks. Is it time for that?
Well, I think every option needs to be on the table. I can't believe we even have to say this, but for God's sake, do not disrespect, let alone harm, flight crews who, as the captain always says, are there for your safety. Now, we've seen prosecutors stepping up to follow up. This is very important because there has to be that kind of accountability, and that's why these criminal complaints, obviously nothing about these stories is good news, but it is encouraging to see those steps being taken. Also, FAA stepping forward with enhanced attention and fines. I think there's going to be more information today on some of the latest numbers, perhaps seeing some progress, but it is absolutely unacceptable for there to ever be more than 0 such incidents. And I do think that warrants further attention to anything else that could be done, not just within the Department of Transportation or FAA, but really partnering with other agencies to make sure that flight crews are safe. By the way, this is not just about protecting flight attendants who have been on the front lines of this pandemic, who are there for your safety. This is also protecting other passengers. It threatens the safety of an entire aircraft.
Of course
when
it does,
one
but
passenger behaves this way.
I do want to ask you about this because in this particular case, American Airlines says, look, this guy who is accused of this will never fly on another American flight again, but he has other options. So you have a gentleman accused of punching a flight attendant with such force that her head hit a lavatory door. He had to be taped to a chair. He had plastic bindings put in place to restrain him. Why should he be able to fly on a Delta flight? Is it time for the federal government to step in?
Again, I think this is a very good question. Obviously, that raises a lot of legal and other issues that have to be looked at, but they should be looked at, and now's the time. I've heard the chair of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee propose an approach that I think some of the flight attendants unions are interested in, where there's a shared database. You could also look at something more along the lines of that no-fly concept that's federally housed. That's not a step to be taken lightly, but I think every option has to be on the table because this is completely unacceptable.
We saw some big disruptions over the weekend when it came to American Airlines passengers. Let's listen to what they said.
It's annoying because it wasn't just American, it was Southwest a couple weeks ago. So yeah, they're canceling up until we have to stay here. So it kind of leaves us stranded for a while.
Incredibly frustrating.
American's awful.
Like, never flying them again.
So thousands of American Airlines flights. Not too long ago, it was Southwest. It seems like air travel is a bit unreliable right now. What do you say to air travelers who think that?
Well, look, air travel is still an extraordinary and safe way to get around, to see loved ones and to do business. But we have seen another round of disruptions. Both of those slightly different stories, but largely similar in that they were caused by a weather event that happened in one of the worst possible places for that particular airline's network. And when that happens, so for example, American, very much based around Dallas-Fort Worth area, when it happens in a certain place, that can ripple throughout the system because you have planes and people not in the right places at the right time. You add to that the fact that the aviation sector, while it's made a remarkable recovery, by the way, I would argue a remarkable recovery largely thanks to the American Rescue Plan and the president's leadership, they're still not staffed at the levels that you saw pre-pandemic, which means when you do have a blow, a disruption, a shock, it can be a little more vulnerable in terms of that rippling through the system. Now, it's up to the airlines to find new and more nimble ways to be ready to respond to those disruptions. And they're doing that. They're doing remarkable work. But obviously incredibly frustrating if you are left in the lurch because of one of those weather-related disruptions.
Yeah, certainly is. Secretary Buttigieg, thank you.